MIT, GPL, all rights reserved. Let's talk about licenses. Alright, we find ourselves here with another modding tip, and this time I want to show you the site choosealicense.com. This is actually a great resource, and we basically want to go into a little bit of what the licenses for your, for your mod could be, or for any software project for that matter. Now, first of all, this is not legal advice. I want to make that completely clear over here, for educational purposes only in this case, and I highly recommend taking a look at the Choose a License site as well. That is a great site of basically where you can take a look at, more licenses to choose and what each of the licenses mean. So for example, I personally use the MIT license for pretty much all of my projects. And let's just take a look at this one. You can see it basically, gives you the entire text. This is a very, very tiny text when you think about all of the licenses and all of that stuff, right? When you look at terms of service and things like these, they're usually pages upon pages upon pages, where this is, you can actually you have a full overview of it on one page, and then also it's not that badly written. Of course it's still written in lawyer speech, let's say, but this is just how it's going to be. Anyway, the site has a very, very useful thing where you can see what the permissions are, what the conditions are, and what the limitations are. Now, one thing that you basically always want, and this is why something like the MIT license is kind of great, is that when you want your mod or your software project or whatever to be available to other people, right? So they can, in this case, they can modify it, they can use it privately, they can distribute it, they can even do a commercial use on it if they so choose. Okay, that's fine. Now the conditions that apply is that they have to copy this particular license with them, and they have to display that so that it's clear. Hey, we've taken this part of our software from this person under the MIT license. That has to be the case. And now, what are the limitations? This is probably one of the most important things, because this is basically why this can be so important, is that you aren't liable, you don't give any warranty. This basically means if, for example, Microsoft were to come along and was like, hey, you know what, this looks like a great piece of code, and they take a code from you, and you're like, that's amazing, right? And then all of a sudden, every Windows server on the whole world crashes, right? And then your code was responsible for it. If it was under the MIT license, they can't hold you liable for it. And then warranty basically just means that you explicitly state that there's no warranty provided. That's the general idea. So this is why I personally say MIT license is great. Some people just don't want, certain permissions here activated, and for that, there are some other licenses. So there's another license that is interesting, and that's the GPL license. So this is where you have to basically, any changes that are made on your code basically have to, as you can see, right, same license, so modifications must be released under the same license when distributed to the licensed material. This is something called copyleft. The general idea is that once you basically use some work that is under the GPL license, then what would happen is that you would have to copy the same license as well and release that under the same license. That's the general idea and general overview here. Of course, for details, you can always take a look at the license. You can see this is much more complicated. I just like the MIT license. There are a lot of similar in a lot of ways, but you can still basically take a look at that. And then there's also more licenses available, which is also great. So you can see there are some other ones. GPL, this is the one that we've taken a look at. There's also the lesser GPL. Mozilla public license could be interesting. Apache, MIT, we've taken a look at that. The unlicensed license is also very funny. It's basically just do whatever. It's basically, in the public domain at that point. So I highly recommend just checking this out. The site, it can be very useful. Also, if you don't choose a license, that's also very important, right? Then it basically always means that it is all rights reserved. This is the general idea. You can see the work is under exclusive copyright by default. So if you take a look at any source code and there's no license there, you should always assume all rights reserved and never just take code from them, because that is not a good idea. So I highly recommend checking out the site. Hopefully this illuminated the idea of licenses a little bit. Like I said, best take a look at the site, read through the licenses if this is really a thing that is important to you and you really want to look into it. Well, that's going to be it for this modding tip right here. Hope you found this useful and you learned something new, and I'll see you all in the next video. So yeah.